Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So, if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin.
If you ever want to know who your enemies are, just hand them your calendar and see who schedules your funeral. I'm David Tate, and 15 years of marriage taught me that sometimes the person sleeping next to you is sharpening the knife. My name is David, and I used to think I had it all figured out. Married to Monica for 15 years, 3 beautiful kids, Emma, Jake, and little Sophie, and a decent job as a forensic accountant. The kind of life where you mow the lawn on Saturdays and argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. Normal, predictable, safe. I should have known something was wrong when Monica started wearing makeup to the grocery store. It was a Tuesday morning in September when she served me the papers. Not literally served. That would have been too dramatic for Monica. She just slid them across the breakfast table, between my coffee and the sports section, casual as you please. I want a divorce, David. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Emma was upstairs getting ready for school. Jake was in the shower. Sophie was watching cartoons in the living room, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to explode. What? I looked up from the papers, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Petition for dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, child support, spousal support. Monica was already dressed for work, her blonde hair perfectly styled, lips painted that shade of red she saved for important meetings. She looked like she was heading to a job interview, not ending our marriage. You heard me. I'm done, David. We're done. She poured herself coffee with steady hands. I've already talked to a lawyer. You'll pay child support for 3 kids forever. The way she said it, with that little laugh at the end, made my blood run cold. Like she was telling me about a stock tip or a good deal on groceries. Monica, what are you talking about? We can work through whatever this is. Marriage counseling or no. She cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. I've made up my mind. You can fight it if you want, but you'll just make it harder on yourself. And more expensive. I stared at the papers. The demands were brutal. The house, my grandfather's house that I'd inherited and we'd renovated together. My retirement account. Maximum child support based on imputed income that was double what I actually made. Spousal support for 10 years. You'll pay forever, she repeated. And this time the laugh was longer, crueler. But here's the thing about being a forensic accountant. You learn to notice patterns. You learn to spot inconsistencies. You learn to follow the money and ask uncomfortable questions. And I'd been asking those questions for a long time. Emma came downstairs, backpack slung over her shoulder, earbuds already in. 15 years old and beautiful like her mother, but with my stubborn chin. She grabbed a banana from the counter. Morning, Dad. Mom. Morning, sweetheart, I managed. Jake thundered down the stairs next, all elbows and knees at 13. Can you drive me to practice tonight, Dad? Mom said she might be late. We'll see, Monica said before I could answer. Things are going to be different around here. After the kids left for school, Monica gathered her purse and briefcase. She paused at the door, looking back at me with something that might have been pity. I know this is hard, David, but it's for the best. You'll understand eventually. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with divorce papers and the smell of her expensive perfume. I sat there for a long time, staring at those documents. The lawyer's name was embossed at the top. Patricia Hendricks, family law. I knew the type, sharp suit, sharper tongue, the kind of attorney who could make Mother Teresa look like a deadbeat. But Monica had made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was the same David she'd married 15 years ago. The eager young accountant who believed in love and trust and happily ever after, the guy who never questioned why Jake had his grandfather's green eyes when both Monica and I had brown. The husband who didn't think twice about Emma's artistic talents when neither of us could draw a straight line with a ruler. The man who didn't wonder why Sophie was born exactly 9 months after Monica's business trip to Chicago. I'd been wondering about these things for years. Quietly, carefully, because when you're a forensic accountant, you learn that the truth always leaves a paper trail. And I'd been following that trail for a very long time. The first time I suspected something was wrong was 3 years into our marriage. Monica had just given birth to Jake, and I was over the moon about being a father again. Emma was 2, toddling around the house and getting into everything, and now we had this perfect little boy to complete our family. Except Jake didn't look like me, or Monica for that matter. "He looks just like your father," Monica would say when people commented. But I'd seen pictures of my father as a baby, and Jake looked nothing like him either. I told myself I was being paranoid. Babies change. Genetics are weird. Sometimes kids look like distant relatives you've never met. But then there was the timing. Jake was born exactly 9 months after Monica started working out with her personal trainer, Marcus, a guy who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine, all muscles and white teeth and easy charm. The kind of guy who made other men feel inadequate just by existing. Marcus, who had green eyes, just like Jake. I started paying attention after that. Really paying attention. Monica's late nights at work became more frequent. Her business trips lasted longer. She started password protecting her phone and closing her laptop when I walked into the room. And then there were the friends. Tom Bradley had been my best friend since college. We'd been each other's best men, spent countless weekends together, coached Little League together. Tom was the godfather to all 3 of my kids. Tom, who started avoiding eye contact when Sophie was born. Tom, who suddenly became too busy for our weekly poker games. Tom, who looked guilty every time I mentioned how much Sophie resembled Monica's side of the family. The pieces were there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. But when Monica slapped those divorce papers down and told me I'd be paying forever, something clicked into place. The forensic accountant in me took over, and I started building a case. It took me 6 months to gather everything I needed. 6 months of careful documentation, discreet inquiries, and professional-grade investigation. I hired a private detective, a former cop named Reynolds who specialized in domestic cases. I used my professional contacts to access databases and cross-reference information. And slowly, methodically, I built an airtight case. The DNA tests were the final piece. I collected samples during routine dental cleanings. A hair from Emma's brush, saliva from Jake's retainer, a few strands from Sophie's pillow. I used a lab in the next state, paid cash, and made sure the chain of custody was bulletproof. The results came back on a Friday afternoon. I sat in my car in the lab's parking lot and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Emma, 0.0% probability of paternity, and Jake, 0.0% probability of paternity, and Sophie, 0.0% probability of paternity, and no, none of them were mine. Not one. 15 years of my life. 15 years of bedtime stories and soccer games and parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties. 15 years of loving children who weren't mine, raised by a woman who'd been lying to my face since day one. I sat in that parking lot and felt something break inside me, not my heart. That had been cracking for years. Something deeper. Something fundamental. The man who'd trusted blindly was gone. In his place was someone harder. Someone who understood that the world was full of hunters, and sometimes the only way to survive was to become one yourself. 6 months later, I was sitting in Judge Harrison's courtroom, watching Monica preen in her victory dress. She'd chosen red. Power red, she called it. The kind of outfit you wear when you're about to destroy someone's life and want to look good doing it. Her lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, was everything I'd expected. Mid-40s, steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, the kind of smile that could cut glass. She'd been circling me like a shark for weeks, demanding financial disclosures and threatening sanctions if I didn't cooperate. I'd cooperated. Oh, how I'd cooperated. Monica was sitting at the plaintiff's table, radiating confidence. She'd already mentally spent my retirement money, already picked out new furniture for the house she was about to steal, already planned her new life as a wealthy divorcee. "You look nervous, David," she'd whispered to me in the hallway before we went in. "You should have taken the settlement offer. This is going to be so much worse for you." I'd just smiled and patted the manila envelope in my jacket pocket. "Mr. Tate," Judge Harrison said, looking over his reading glasses at me, "I understand you're representing yourself today?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you've had a chance to review the proposed settlement agreement?" "I have, Your Honor." "Do you understand that by rejecting this agreement, you're waiving significant rights, Mrs.? Tate's proposal is quite generous, considering the circumstances." "Generous, right? Like a mugging is generous because they let you keep your shoes." "I understand, Your Honor, but before I sign anything, I'd like to submit some evidence for the court's consideration." Patricia Hendricks was on her feet immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This is far too late for discovery. Mr. Tate has had months to provide any evidence he might have. Your Honor, I said, standing up slowly, this evidence directly relates to the fundamental basis of this proceeding. I believe it's in the interests of justice that the court review it. Monica was looking at me now, her perfect smile flickering slightly. For the first time since this whole thing started, she looked uncertain. Judge Harrison considered for a moment. I'll allow it. What do you have, Mr. Tate? I opened the manila envelope and pulled out 3 sets of documents. Professional lab reports, chain of custody forms, certified results from the most reputable DNA testing facility in the state. Your Honor, I'd like to submit DNA test results for the 3 minor children involved in this case. The courtroom went dead silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine, the sound of Monica's sharp intake of breath. Patricia Hendricks grabbed the documents from the bailiff, her eyes scanning quickly. I watched her face change as she read, watched the color drain from her cheeks. Your Honor, she said, her voice suddenly hoarse, I need a moment to confer with my client. But Judge Harrison was already reading. I watched his expression shift from mild interest to shock to something that looked like disgust. Monica was tugging on her lawyer's sleeve, whispering frantically, What does it say? Patricia, what does it say? Judge Harrison looked up from the documents. He stared at Monica for a long moment, then at me, then back at Monica. Paternity is excluded, he said. 3 words. That's all it took to destroy 15 years of lies. Monica's face went white. Not pale, white, like someone had drained all the blood from her body in an instant. What? She whispered. All 3 children, Judge Harrison continued, his voice cold as winter. 0 probability of paternity for Mr. Tate. The courtroom erupted. Patricia Hendricks was shuffling papers frantically, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Monica was shaking her head, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. That's not possible, she said, her voice rising. That's not possible. There must be a mistake. Ma'am, Judge Harrison said sharply, you'll control yourself in my courtroom or I'll have you removed. I sat back and watched my wife's perfect world collapse in real time. 15 years of careful planning, 15 years of manipulation and lies, destroyed by science and my patience. Your Honor, Patricia Hendricks said, trying to regain control, we'd like to request independent testing. The lab is certified by the state, I interrupted. Chain of custody is documented. The results are conclusive. Judge Harrison was flipping through the additional documents I'd provided. Financial records, investigation reports, a complete paper trail of Monica's deception. Mr. Tate, he said, it appears you've been quite thorough. 15 years thorough, Your Honor. What happened next was beautiful in its simplicity. Sometimes justice isn't complicated. Sometimes it's just math. My lawyer walked into the courtroom. Yes, I had had representation all along, I just hadn't told Monica about it. Richard Kane, one of the best family law attorneys in the state, the kind of man who charged $500 an hour and was worth every penny. Your Honor, Kane said, in light of this new evidence, we're filing a counter-petition. He handed a thick stack of documents to the bailiff. Patricia Hendricks looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Fraud, Kane continued. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Unjust enrichment. We're seeking full reimbursement of all child support paid, plus damages. I'd done the math. 15 years of supporting 3 children who weren't mine, private school tuition, medical bills, clothes, food, vacations, birthday parties, Christmas presents. Every penny I'd spent believing I was taking care of my family. $247,000 plus interest. Monica was hyperventilating now. This is insane. David, you can't do this. They're your children. You raised them. I raised them believing they were mine, I said calmly, because you lied to me. For 15 years. Your Honor, Patricia Hendricks tried again, surely there are mitigating circumstances, such as, Judge Harrison's voice could have frozen fire. My client, that is, Mrs. Tate was young when she married. She made mistakes. She committed fraud, Kane interrupted. Systematic, long-term fraud designed to deceive my client into supporting children that weren't his. This isn't a mistake, Your Honor. This is a criminal enterprise. I watched Monica's face crumble as the reality hit her. No child support, No spousal support. No house, no retirement money. In fact, she owed me $250,000. The marriage is annulled, Judge Harrison declared. Fraud vitiates consent. Mr. Tate, you're entitled to recover all property acquired before the marriage, including the family residence. Mrs. Tate, you have 30 days to vacate. Monica stood up so fast her chair fell over. This isn't fair. David, please. Think about the children. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved, this woman I'd trusted with my life, my future, my heart. This woman who'd stolen 15 years from me and laughed about it. I am thinking about the children, I said. They deserve to know who their real fathers are. The biological fathers. Oh yes, I'd found them all. Marcus Thompson, the personal trainer, Jake's father. Married with 2 kids of his own, coaching Little League in the same town where I lived. He'd been at barbecues at my house, had shaken my hand and called me buddy, while looking at the son he'd never acknowledged. Tom Bradley, my former best friend, Emma's father, the man who'd been my best man, who'd held my daughter at her baptism, who'd avoided my eyes for 13 years because he couldn't stand the guilt. And Richard Morrison, Monica's boss at the marketing firm, Sophie's father, the man who'd been giving my wife promotions and raises while I wondered how we could afford our lifestyle on my salary alone. Kane had already contacted all 3. They could either step up and take financial responsibility for their children or face conspiracy charges for their role in the fraud. Funny how quickly men find their consciences when prison time is on the table. All 3 settled within a week. Monica fired Patricia Hendricks right there in the courtroom, screaming that she was incompetent, that she should have seen this coming, that she was going to sue for malpractice. It was ugly and loud and exactly what she deserved. The judge gavelled for order, but I could see he was enjoying the show. 15 years on the family court bench, he'd probably never seen fraud this systematic, this cruel. Mr. Tate, he said as the courtroom finally quieted down, I want you to know that in 30 years of practicing law, I've rarely seen a case this egregious. You have my sympathy and my admiration for your patience and thoroughness. Patience, that was the key. I could have confronted Monica years ago when I first suspected. I could have demanded DNA tests, filed for divorce, made a scene. But I'd waited. I'd gathered evidence. I'd built an unassailable case, and now Monica had nothing. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle or the financial reckoning. It was facing the children. Emma, Jake, and Sophie. The kids I'd raised, loved, protected. The children who'd called me daddy for 15 years, who'd run to me when they had nightmares, who'd trusted me to keep their world safe and stable. I destroyed their world to save my own. Emma took it the hardest. At 15, she was old enough to understand what the DNA tests meant, old enough to realize that her entire life had been built on a lie. So you're not my real dad? She asked when I sat them all down in what used to be our living room. I'm the only father you've ever known, I said carefully. That hasn't changed. What's changed is that I know the truth now. But you're divorcing Mom because of us, Jake said. He was trying not to cry, but his voice was shaking. Because we're not really yours. No, I said firmly. I'm divorcing your mother because she lied to me, because she let me believe you were mine when she knew you weren't. This isn't about you kids. This is about her choices. Sophie, only 6, didn't really understand. She just knew that Daddy and Mommy weren't going to live together anymore. And that was scary enough. I want to keep seeing you, Emma said finally. If you want to see us, I mean. That broke something in me that the DNA tests and the divorce and all of Monica's lies hadn't touched. Of course I want to see you, I said. You're still the same kids I've loved for all these years. That doesn't change just because we're not related by blood. Jake nodded, wiping his eyes. Tom Bradley came by yesterday. He said he wants to talk to me. Mom said he's my real father. I'd been expecting this. Tom had reached out through lawyers, wanting to establish a relationship with Emma. Marcus wanted to meet Jake. Richard Morrison was pushing for visitation with Sophie. How do you feel about that? I asked. I don't know, Jake said honestly. He's always been around, but as your friend. Now he wants to be my dad? It's weird. Emma was angrier. He knew the whole time, didn't he? He knew he was my father, and he just watched. Watched you pay for everything, watched you take care of me, and he never said anything. Smart girl. She'd figured out the real betrayal faster than most adults would have. What about Mom? Sophie asked in her small voice. That was the question I'd been dreading. Monica was their mother, regardless of what she'd done to me. She loved them. I believed that much was true. But she'd also used them as weapons in her war against me, and that was harder to forgive. Your mom made some bad choices, I said, but she's still your mom, and she loves you. Monica had found a small apartment across town. Her job at the marketing firm had ended abruptly when Richard Morrison's wife found out about the affair. Funny how quickly office romance loses its appeal when DNA tests get involved. She was working at a department store now, trying to make ends meet while paying me back for 15 years of fraud. It would take her decades, even with the settlements from the biological fathers. "Will you be okay, Dad?" Emma asked. Dad. She still called me Dad. "I'll be fine," I said. "Better than fine, actually. I'm finally free to build a life based on truth instead of lies." And that was true. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't wondering if my wife was cheating on me. I wasn't questioning why my children didn't look like me. I wasn't lying awake at night trying to make sense of inconsistencies and gaps in stories. I was free. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met Sarah. She was a teacher at Emma's school, not Emma's teacher, thankfully, because that would have been awkward. She taught second grade, had never been married, and had the kind of honest smile that I'd forgotten existed. We met at a parent-teacher conference. Emma had been struggling since the divorce, and her guidance counselor had suggested I meet with some of the other faculty to discuss her adjustment. Sarah was there as part of the support team, and when she introduced herself, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're the forensic accountant, aren't you? The one who caught his wife in that massive paternity fraud?" Most people whispered about my case. The local newspaper had picked it up, and it had become something of a sensation. "Local man discovers 15-year deception," the headline had read. Social media had exploded with hot takes about DNA testing and marriage and trust. But Sarah just stated it matter-of-factly, like she was asking about the weather. "That's me," I said. "That must have taken incredible patience," she said, "and courage. Mostly just stubbornness," I replied. She laughed. "The best kind." We started talking after that. Coffee dates, then dinner dates, then long walks where I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone. About the years of suspicion and doubt, about the loneliness of living with someone you couldn't trust, about the guilt of loving children who weren't yours and the anger of being used as a paycheck in a cover story. "Do you regret it?" she asked one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. "Exposing everything? You could have just filed for divorce and walked away." "No," I said without hesitation. Monica needed to face consequences, real consequences, and those 3 men needed to take responsibility for their children instead of hiding behind my ignorance. What about the kids? That was the hardest question. Emma came by every weekend, and we'd maintained our relationship despite everything. Jake visited less frequently, but still called me on his birthday and Father's Day. Sophie was too young to understand, but she still hugged me when she saw me. "They deserve the truth," I said. "It hurt them in the short term, but living a lie would have hurt them more in the long run." Sarah nodded. "You know what I admire most about what you did? What's that? You didn't get violent. You didn't destroy property or threaten anyone or do anything illegal. You just documented. You gathered evidence and let the truth speak for itself." That had been intentional. I'd seen too many men destroy their lives in moments of rage, making emotional decisions that gave their cheating wives ammunition in court. I'd stayed calm, stayed methodical, and let the system work. "Revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation," I said, and Sarah laughed. "Is that your life motto now?" "One of them." The other motto was simpler. Trust, but verify. I'd learned to spot the signs of deception, the little inconsistencies that most people overlooked. I'd learned to ask uncomfortable questions and demand honest answers. I'd learned that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most capable of betraying you. But I'd also learned that there were still honest people in the world. People like Sarah, who said what they meant and meant what they said. People like Richard Kane, who'd fought for me because it was the right thing to do. People like Judge Harrison, who'd seen through Monica's lies and delivered real justice. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now I live my life," I said, the real one. The one based on truth instead of lies. 2 years later, Monica tried to have the judgment overturned. She'd found a new lawyer, some ambulance chaser who specialized in impossible cases and Hail Mary appeals. The argument was that I'd been vindictive and cruel in my pursuit of justice, that the punishment didn't fit the crime. The appeal was heard by the same Judge Harrison who'd presided over the original case. I didn't even need to hire a lawyer this time. The evidence spoke for itself. "Mrs. Tate," Judge Harrison said, looking down at Monica from his bench, "you committed systematic fraud for 15 years. You allowed an innocent man to support children that weren't his while you carried on affairs with their biological fathers. You showed no remorse then, and your appeal shows no remorse now. The judgment stands." Monica had aged in the 2 years since our divorce. The stress of working retail, paying restitution, and dealing with 3 children who now knew the truth about their parentage had taken its toll. She looked tired, defeated, older than her 40 years. After the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. "David," she said, "I know you hate me. I know what I did was wrong. But can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? For the kids' sake." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years, who'd borne children she'd told me were mine, who'd planned to take everything I'd worked for and laughed about it. "I don't hate you, Monica," I said finally. "Hate requires caring, and I stopped caring about you the day I opened those DNA results. But the money you owe me is the least of what you took," I said. "You stole 15 years of my life. You stole my trust, my peace of mind, my ability to believe in love and marriage and family. You can't pay that back with money." She started crying then, the kind of desperate tears that come when someone finally realizes the full scope of what they've lost. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, David. I never meant for it to go this far." "Yes, you did," I said. "You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just never meant to get caught." I walked away then, leaving her crying in the courthouse hallway. It was the last time I ever spoke to her. Emma graduated high school that spring. She'd decided to live with me full-time during her senior year, and we'd grown closer than ever. She was planning to study forensic science in college. "I want to find the truth like you did, Dad," she'd said. Jake had moved in with Tom Bradley and seemed to be adjusting well. Tom was trying hard to be a good father, though he carried the guilt of his 15-year deception like a weight around his neck. Sophie was thriving with Richard Morrison and his wife, who'd somehow managed to work through the revelation that he'd fathered a child with his employee. Children are resilient, and Sophie had adapted to her new family structure with the easy acceptance of the very young. The 3 biological fathers were all paying child support now, all trying to build relationships with children they'd ignored for years. It was messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but it was honest. Finally, after all these years, it was honest. Sarah and I got married that fall, a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Emma walked me down the aisle. "Someone has to make sure you don't change your mind," she'd joked. During our vows, I promised Sarah that I would never lie to her, never deceive her, never take her trust for granted. She promised the same. "Some people think marriage is about love," I said in my speech at the reception. "But love isn't enough. Marriage is about truth. It's about building a life together on a foundation of honesty and trust. Without that, everything else is just an elaborate lie." The guests applauded, but I was looking at Emma when I said it. She nodded and smiled, and I knew she understood. 5 years after the divorce, I got a call from Patricia Hendricks, Monica's former lawyer. "Mr. Tate," she said, "I have an unusual request. I'm writing a book about family law cases, and I'd like to include yours in family law circles. Law schools are in family law circles. Law schools are using it as an example of long-term deception and the importance of DNA testing in paternity cases." A legend. I suppose that was better than being a cautionary tale. "What would you want to know?" "How did you stay so calm? How did you manage to investigate for so long without tipping your hand? Most men would have confronted their wives immediately." I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "I'm a forensic accountant," I said finally. "My job is to follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable the truth might be. When I started suspecting Monica was lying to me, I treated it like any other case. I gathered evidence, built a timeline, documented everything. But it must have been emotional. These were your children, your wife, your life." "The emotion came later," I said. "During the investigation, I had to stay detached. I had to treat it like a puzzle to be solved, rather than a life to be destroyed." "And now, how do you feel about it now?" I looked around my home office, where Sarah was grading papers at her desk, while I worked on a case involving embezzlement at a local charity. Emma's college graduation photo sat on my bookshelf next to pictures of Jake at his high school football games and Sophie at her dance recital. I feel freed, I said. For the first time in 15 years, I'm living an honest life with people who tell me the truth. That's worth more than anything Monica took from me. One last question, Patricia said. Do you have any advice for other men who might be in similar situations? I thought about all the men who'd reached out to me over the years, men who'd read about my case and recognized their own situations, men living with doubt, suspicion, the nagging feeling that something wasn't right in their marriages. Trust your instincts, I said. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't let anyone tell you you're being paranoid or controlling. And if you find evidence of deception, document everything before you act. The truth is powerful, but only if you can prove it. After I hung up, Sarah looked over at me from her desk. How does it feel to be famous? She asked with a smile. Infamous is more like it, I said. But I'll take it. She came over and kissed my cheek. I'm proud of you, for fighting back, for not letting them destroy you. They didn't destroy me, I said. They revealed me, showed me what I was really capable of when I stopped being naive and started being smart. I pulled up the case files on my computer, a new investigation involving a CEO who was skimming from his company's pension fund. Another puzzle to solve, another truth to uncover. Some men break when they discover they've been living a lie. Some men get violent or self-destruct or lose themselves in anger and bitterness. But some men get methodical. Some men get patient. Some men learn that the best revenge isn't violence or destruction. It's the cold, hard truth, properly documented and legally presented. Some men learn to cut the last wire and watch the whole house of lies come tumbling down. I was one of those men.